Jake Martinez walked into Riverside Park like he owned every inch of it. The sun was shining bright that Tuesday afternoon, and Jake felt like the whole world was watching him. He wore his favorite black hoodie with ripped jeans and expensive sneakers that he had bought with money from his last job. The job he had quit 3 weeks ago because his boss was always telling him what to do. At 19 years old, Jake thought he knew everything about life. He had dropped out of community college after just 1 semester because studying was boring, and the professors did not understand how smart he really was. His parents kept asking him what his plans were for the future, but Jake did not want to think about boring stuff like that. He wanted to live in the moment and have fun. The basketball courts at Riverside Park were Jake's favorite place to hang out. He loved watching the games and making loud comments about the players. Sometimes he would join in, but most of the time he preferred to stand on the sidelines with his friends and act like he was better than everyone else. His friends thought Jake was cool because he always had something funny or mean to say about other people. Tommy and Rico were Jake's best friends, and they followed him everywhere. Tommy was short and skinny and always laughed at Jake's jokes, even when they were not funny. Rico was quiet most of the time, but he had a good camera on his phone, and he liked making videos. The 3 friends had been hanging out together since middle school, and they all dropped out of high school around the same time. Jake pulled out his phone and checked his social media accounts. He had been trying to become famous online for almost 2 years now, but he only had about 300 followers. His videos got some likes, but never went viral like he wanted them to. Jake was always looking for new content that would get him more attention and make him internet famous. The park was full of people that afternoon. Families were having picnics on the grass and kids were playing on the playground equipment. Old people sat on benches feeding birds and reading newspapers. Dog owners walked their pets on the paved paths that went around the whole park. Jake looked at all these people and saw them as his audience. Jake had a plan for today. He wanted to make a video that would get thousands of views and shares. He had been watching other internet stars and noticed that the most popular videos were often pranks or jokes played on strangers. Jake thought this was easy money and easy fame. All he had to do was find the right target and do something surprising or funny. Tommy and Rico stood behind Jake as he looked around the park for ideas. They had their phones ready to record whatever Jake decided to do. The 3 friends had made prank videos before, but they never got much attention online. Jake was getting frustrated because he felt like he deserved to be famous and rich like the people he saw on social media. Jake's confidence came from the fact that he was bigger and stronger than most people his age. He had played football in high school before he dropped out, and he still worked out sometimes at the local gym. He used his size to intimidate people and make them do what he wanted. This made him feel powerful and important. The afternoon sun was getting lower in the sky, and more people were coming to the park after work and school. Jake knew this was the perfect time to make his video because there would be plenty of people around to watch and maybe even help his video go viral by sharing it with their friends. Jake cracked his knuckles and grinned at his friends. He had no idea that this afternoon would change his life forever. He was about to learn a lesson that would stay with him for the rest of his days. But right now, Jake Martinez felt like the king of the world, and nothing could stop him from getting the fame and attention he thought he deserved. The stage was set for something that would shock everyone in the park, including Jake himself. Jake was walking around the park with Tommy and Rico when he spotted something that made his eyes light up with excitement. Near the old wooden bench by the pond sat a small golden retriever. The dog was alone and looked completely peaceful as he watched people walk by on the path. The golden retriever had the most beautiful coat that shined like gold in the afternoon sunlight. His fur was clean and well brushed, which showed that someone took very good care of him. The dog wore a simple blue collar around his neck, but Jake could not see any tags or nameplate from where he was standing. This made Jake think that maybe the dog was lost or had no owner nearby. Buddy was the dog's name, though Jake did not know this yet. Buddy was 3 years old and had never experienced anything mean or cruel in his whole life. He had been raised with love and kindness from the day he was born. Every person Buddy had ever met had been nice to him and given him treats or gentle pets on his head. The friendly dog sat quietly by the bench because his owner had told him to wait right there. Buddy was a very good dog who always listened to commands and never ran away or caused trouble. He had been trained well and knew that when someone told him to stay in one spot, he should not move until they came back for him. Jake watched Buddy for several minutes and noticed how the dog would wag his tail whenever people walked past him. Some joggers smiled and waved at Buddy as they ran by. A few kids pointed at the pretty golden dog and asked their parents if they could pet him. Buddy seemed to love all the attention, and his tail never stopped moving back and forth. Tommy and Rico stood behind Jake and waited to see what their friend was planning to do. They could tell by the look on Jake's face that he had found his target for today's video. Rico already had his phone out and was checking to make sure the camera was working properly. Tommy was looking around to see if anyone was watching them. Jake pulled out his own phone and started the camera app. He held the phone up and began talking to the screen like he was already famous. He told his imaginary audience that he was about to do something hilarious that would make them laugh until their stomachs hurt. Jake loved pretending that millions of people were watching him even though he knew only Tommy and Rico could hear him. Buddy noticed Jake and his friends approaching, but the innocent dog was not worried at all. In Buddy's experience, all people were good people who wanted to be his friend. The dog's tail started wagging faster as Jake got closer because Buddy thought he was about to get some attention, and maybe even some treats. The golden retriever had no way of knowing that Jake was not like the other people he had met in his life. Buddy could not understand that some humans enjoyed being mean to animals just for fun. The trusting dog had never learned to be afraid of people because no one had ever given him a reason to be scared. Jake stopped about 10 feet away from Buddy and whispered to his friends about his plan. He told Tommy and Rico to get their cameras ready because this was going to be the video that finally made him internet famous. Jake was so excited about getting views and likes that he did not think about how his actions might hurt an innocent animal. The afternoon was perfect for making videos with good lighting and plenty of space to move around. Other people in the park were busy with their own activities and not paying attention to Jake and his friends. This made Jake feel like he could do whatever he wanted without anyone stopping him. Buddy continued to sit patiently by the bench, completely unaware that his peaceful day was about to be ruined by someone who cared more about social media fame than being kind to animals. Jake walked slowly toward Buddy with a fake smile on his face. He held his phone up high to make sure the camera would capture everything that was about to happen. Tommy and Rico spread out to different sides so they could film from multiple angles. Jake wanted this video to look professional so it would get more views and shares online. Buddy's tail wagged even faster as Jake got closer. The innocent dog thought this nice young man was coming over to play with him or give him treats. Buddy had met so many friendly people in the park before, and he expected Jake to be just like all the others. The golden retriever's brown eyes sparkled with excitement and joy. Jake knelt down next to Buddy and started petting him gently on the head. His voice was sweet and kind as he talked to the dog, but Jake was only acting this way for the camera. He wanted the beginning of his video to look normal so that what happened next would be more shocking and surprising for people watching online. Buddy loved getting attention, and he moved closer to Jake. The trusting dog even licked Jake's hand to show how happy he was to make a new friend. Buddy had no idea that Jake was not really his friend at all. The poor dog could not understand that some people pretend to be nice when they are actually planning to do something terrible. Jake continued petting Buddy for about 30 seconds while he talked to his phone camera. He told his imaginary audience that he was just saying hello to this cute dog he found in the park. But Jake's eyes had a mean look in them that the camera could not see. He was getting ready to do something that would hurt an innocent animal just so he could get famous on the internet. Without any warning at all, Jake suddenly grabbed Buddy's tail and yanked it as hard as he could. The pain was immediate and terrible for the poor dog. Buddy let out a loud yelp that sounded like a cry for help. The dog tried to turn around to see what was happening, but Jake held onto his tail tightly. The golden retriever had never felt pain like this before in his entire life. Buddy did not understand why this person who had been petting him nicely was now hurting him so badly. The dog's eyes filled with fear and confusion as he tried to get away from Jake, but could not move because of the grip on his tail. Jake laughed loudly as he watched Buddy struggle and cry out in pain. He thought this was the funniest thing he had ever seen. Tommy and Rico were also laughing as they recorded everything with their phones. The three friends thought they were creating comedy gold that would make them internet famous overnight. But Jake was not done with his cruel act yet. He let go of Buddy's tail and then kicked dirt and leaves at the frightened dog. Buddy tried to run away, but Jake followed him and continued throwing dirt in his face. The poor animal was coughing and trying to get the dirt out of his eyes, while also dealing with the pain in his tail. Jake grabbed Buddy by the collar and pulled him back toward the bench. The dog was whimpering now, and his whole body was shaking with fear. Buddy had gone from being happy and excited to being terrified and hurt in just a few seconds. The innocent dog could not understand why anyone would want to cause him pain. Tommy cheered Jake on and told him to do something even more dramatic for the camera. Rico was laughing so hard he could barely hold his phone steady. The three friends were having the time of their lives while they tortured an innocent animal who had never done anything wrong to anyone. Jake felt powerful and important as he continued his attack on Buddy. He loved hearing his friends laugh and cheer for him. This was exactly the kind of content he knew would go viral and make him famous. The sound of Buddy's painful yelps and cries began to attract attention from other people in the park. A woman pushing her baby in a stroller was the first to notice what was happening near the bench by the pond. She stopped walking and stared in shock as she watched Jake continue to hurt the innocent golden retriever. More people started to gather around the scene as word spread quickly through the park. An elderly man who had been feeding ducks at the pond hurried over to see what was causing such terrible sounds. Two teenage girls who were taking selfies put down their phones and ran toward the commotion. A family having a picnic on the grass packed up their food and came over to investigate. Jake was so focused on making his video and showing off for his friends that he did not notice the crowd forming around him at first. He continued to torment Buddy while Tommy and Rico kept filming from different angles. The three friends were laughing and having fun while everyone else in the park was becoming more and more upset about what they were seeing. A mother with two young children tried to cover her kids' eyes so they would not have to watch the cruel treatment of the dog. But her 6-year-old son had already seen enough to start crying. The little boy loved dogs and could not understand why anyone would want to hurt such a sweet animal. His tears made his mother even more angry at Jake. Several people in the growing crowd pulled out their own phones and started recording what was happening. But these people were not recording for entertainment like Jake's friends were doing. They were recording evidence of animal cruelty that they planned to show to the police. Some of them were already calling the authorities to report what they were witnessing. An older woman with gray hair pushed through the crowd and shouted at Jake to stop hurting the dog immediately. Her voice was loud and angry, and she pointed her finger at Jake, like a mother scolding a bad child. But Jake just laughed at her and told her to mind her own business. He thought he was tough enough to handle one old lady. A man in a business suit who had been walking home from work also tried to intervene. He stepped closer to Jake and demanded that he let the dog go right now. The businessman had a deep voice and looked serious, but Jake was not intimidated. He told the man to back off and leave him alone, or there would be trouble. The crowd was getting bigger and louder as more people discovered what was happening. Some folks were shouting at Jake to stop, while others were trying to call for help on their phones. A few people were taking pictures and videos to post on social media, but not for the same reasons as Jake. They wanted to expose his cruelty and make sure he faced consequences for his actions. Buddy was still whimpering and trying to escape from Jake's grip. The poor dog looked around at all the people surrounding him and seemed confused about why no one was helping him. Buddy's golden fur was now dirty from all the dust and leaves that Jake had thrown at him. His tail was still hurting badly from being yanked so hard. Tommy and Rico started to feel uncomfortable as they realized how many people were watching and recording them. They had expected their prank to be funny, but the crowd was not laughing at all. Instead, everyone looked angry and disgusted. Some people in the crowd were staring directly at Tommy and Rico with disapproving expressions. Jake finally noticed all the attention he was getting, but instead of feeling embarrassed, he felt excited. He thought this meant his video would definitely go viral now that so many people were watching. Jake had no idea that viral fame for animal cruelty was not the kind of attention he actually wanted. The atmosphere in the park had completely changed from peaceful and relaxing to tense and hostile. People were no longer enjoying their afternoon activities. Instead, everyone was focused on the terrible scene playing out near the pond. Some parents were gathering their children and leaving the park because they did not want their kids to see any more violence. But something was about to happen that would change everything. Someone was approaching through the crowd who would make Jake regret every cruel thing he had done to Buddy. The person in the gray hoodie reached up with both hands and slowly pulled the hood back from their head. What happened next made the entire crowd gasp in shock and disbelief. Standing before them was Marcus Thompson, the heavyweight boxing champion, who had been all over the news and sports channels for the past 2 years. Jake's mouth fell open, and his phone nearly slipped from his hands. He recognized Marcus immediately from all the fight posters and television interviews he had seen. This was not just any dog owner. This was one of the most dangerous men in the world, a professional fighter who could knock out opponents with a single punch. Marcus Thompson was huge. He stood 6 feet 4 inches tall and weighed over 240 pounds of pure muscle. His arms were covered in tattoos that told the story of his rise from poverty to championship glory. His shoulders were so broad they seemed to block out the sun behind him. Jake had never seen anyone so physically intimidating in person. The crowd began whispering excitedly as more people recognized the famous boxer. Some folks pulled out their phones to take pictures with the celebrity, but they kept their distance out of respect. Everyone knew that Marcus Thompson was not someone you wanted to make angry. His reputation in the ring was legendary for both his skill and his temper. Jake's friends Tommy and Rico immediately stopped filming and started backing away from the scene. They recognized Marcus too and wanted nothing to do with whatever was about to happen. Tommy's hands were shaking as he put his phone in his pocket. Rico was looking around for the nearest exit from the park. Marcus Thompson had won his last 15 fights and 12 of them had ended in brutal knockouts. He was scheduled to defend his title in 2 months against the #1 contender. Sports writers called him the most feared heavyweight since Mike Tyson. And Jake had just spent the last 10 minutes torturing his beloved dog. Buddy pressed closer against Marcus's leg and looked up at his owner with pure love and trust. It was obvious that this dog meant everything to the champion boxer. Marcus reached down and gently scratched behind Buddy's ears while never taking his eyes off Jake. The contrast between his gentleness with the dog and his intimidating presence was striking. Jake tried to take a step backward, but his legs felt like they were made of jelly. All the confidence and toughness he had been feeling just minutes ago had completely disappeared. He was face to face with a man who could literally kill him with his bare hands. And that man was clearly not happy about what Jake had done to his dog. Marcus Thompson's voice was calm and controlled when he finally spoke, but everyone could hear the anger underneath. He asked Jake to explain why he thought it was acceptable to hurt an innocent animal. Every word was spoken slowly and clearly, like Marcus was trying very hard to control his temper. The famous boxer's hands were enormous. Jake stared at them and tried to imagine what it would feel like to be hit by one of those fists. Marcus had knocked out opponents who were trained professional fighters. Jake was just a 19-year-old dropout who had never been in a real fight in his life. People in the crowd were now recording this confrontation between the local bully and the world champion boxer. They knew they were witnessing something that would be talked about for years to come. Some folks were already posting on social media about seeing Marcus Thompson at the park defending his dog. Jake tried to stammer out an apology, but his voice came out as a weak whisper. He said he was just making a video and did not mean to really hurt the dog. But even as the words came out of his mouth, Jake knew how pathetic and stupid they sounded. There was no excuse for what he had done. Marcus Thompson had grown up in a rough neighborhood where he learned to protect himself and the things he cared about. He had fought his way to the top of the boxing world through determination and incredible toughness. But he also had a soft spot for animals and children who could not defend themselves. The champion boxer looked around at the crowd of people who had gathered to watch Jake's cruel behavior. He saw the angry faces of parents and the frightened expressions of children who had witnessed the attack on his dog. Marcus realized that Jake had not just hurt Buddy. He had traumatized everyone in the park. Jake's entire body was now shaking with fear. He had gone from feeling like the king of the park to feeling like a mouse trapped by a lion. The 300 followers on his social media accounts seemed completely meaningless now that he was facing the consequences of his actions. Marcus Thompson took one step closer to Jake, and the crowd held its breath to see what would happen next. Marcus Thompson stood directly in front of Jake now, with only 3 feet of space between them. The heavyweight champion's massive frame cast a shadow over the much smaller young man who had hurt his dog. Marcus did not need to raise his voice or make threats because his reputation and physical presence spoke louder than any words could. Jake could smell the scent of leather and sweat that seemed to follow Marcus everywhere he went. This was the smell of countless hours spent training in the gym preparing for fights against the toughest men in the world. Jake realized he was standing face to face with someone who had dedicated his entire life to learning how to hurt people professionally. The famous boxer's eyes were dark brown and intense as he stared directly at Jake without blinking. Marcus had the kind of stare that made grown men confess their crimes in police stations. It was a look that said he could see right through any lies or excuses. Jake felt like his soul was being examined by someone who had seen every kind of person imaginable. Marcus spoke in a voice that was quiet but filled with controlled anger. He asked Jake if he thought hurting innocent animals was funny. He wanted to know if Jake would find it amusing if someone bigger and stronger decided to hurt him the same way he had hurt Buddy. The questions hung in the air like a challenge. Jake tried to answer, but his mouth was so dry he could barely form words. He managed to whisper that he was sorry and that it was just supposed to be a joke for his video. But Marcus interrupted him and said that real men do not hurt things that cannot fight back. The champion's words hit Jake harder than any physical blow could have. The crowd around them had grown even larger as news spread through the park that Marcus Thompson was confronting someone who had abused his dog. People were streaming over from all parts of the park to witness this incredible scene. Many folks were recording everything on their phones, knowing this would be shared millions of times online. Marcus reached into his pocket, and Jake flinched, thinking the boxer might pull out a weapon. But instead, Marcus pulled out his own phone and showed Jake a picture of Buddy as a tiny puppy. The champion explained that he had rescued Buddy from an animal shelter 3 years ago, and that the dog had never known anything but love and kindness until today. The famous fighter's voice cracked slightly with emotion as he talked about how Buddy had helped him through some of the darkest periods of his career. When Marcus was recovering from injuries or dealing with the pressure of being a world champion, Buddy was always there to comfort him. The dog was not just a pet but a member of his family. Jake listened to Marcus talk about his love for Buddy and felt a sick feeling growing in his stomach. He began to understand that what he had thought was just a harmless prank had actually been a vicious attack on something precious and innocent. The reality of his actions was starting to sink in for the first time. Marcus Thompson had been in the ring with killers and criminals who would do anything to win a fight, but he had never felt as disgusted with another human being as he felt looking at Jake right now. The boxer explained that people who hurt animals for fun were the lowest form of life he could imagine. Tommy and Rico had completely abandoned their friend and were nowhere to be seen in the crowd. Jake realized that when things got serious, his so-called friends had run away and left him to face the consequences alone. The people he thought cared about him had only been interested in him when he was making them laugh. Jake's expensive sneakers and trendy clothes now seemed ridiculous compared to Marcus Thompson's simple gray hoodie and worn jeans. The champion boxer did not need fancy things to prove his worth. His reputation and character spoke for themselves. Jake realized how shallow and empty his own life had become. Marcus asked Jake what his parents would think if they knew their son spent his time torturing innocent animals for internet views. He wondered out loud what kind of person Jake planned to become if this was how he treated helpless creatures. The questions cut deep because Jake had never really thought about the man he was becoming. The heavyweight champion leaned down slightly so his face was even closer to Jake's. Marcus told him that there were consequences for every action, and that Jake was about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong dog. The words were spoken softly, but they carried the weight of absolute certainty. Jake could hear his own heart beating in his ears as he waited to see what Marcus Thompson would do next. He had never been so terrified in his entire life. All his dreams of internet fame now seemed like the foolish fantasies of a child who had no idea how the real world worked. Marcus Thompson did not need to lay a single finger on Jake to completely destroy him. The heavyweight champion simply stood there in silence for 30 seconds, while Jake trembled like a leaf in the wind. Those 30 seconds felt like 30 hours to Jake as he waited for something terrible to happen to him. But Marcus was smarter than Jake gave him credit for. The champion boxer knew that if he hurt Jake physically, it would only cause more problems for everyone involved. Instead, Marcus chose to let Jake's own fear and guilt be his punishment. Sometimes the threat of violence was more powerful than violence itself. Jake's hands were shaking so badly that he could barely hold his phone. When Marcus noticed this, he calmly told Jake to delete the video he had made of hurting Buddy. Jake did not hesitate for even 1 second. He quickly found the video on his phone and deleted it permanently, while Marcus watched to make sure it was really gone. The crowd around them had grown to over 50 people now. Everyone was recording this confrontation between the famous boxer and the young man who had abused his dog. Jake realized that instead of getting the viral fame he was about to become famous for all the wrong reasons. He would be known as the coward who tortured an innocent animal. Marcus asked Jake for his full name and address. When Jake hesitated, Marcus's voice became even more serious and intimidating. Jake quickly gave Marcus all his personal information, including where he lived and worked. The champion boxer wrote everything down in his phone, while explaining that he wanted to make sure Jake faced proper consequences. Several people in the crowd had already called the police and animal control officers. The sirens could be heard getting closer to the park as law enforcement responded to reports of animal cruelty. Jake's face went completely white when he realized he was about to be arrested in front of all these people and cameras. Marcus Thompson walked over to an elderly woman in the crowd who had been one of the first people to try to stop Jake's attack on Buddy. He thanked her for caring about his dog and asked if she would be willing to serve as a witness when the police arrived. The woman agreed immediately and said she had recorded everything on her phone. More witnesses stepped forward offering to testify about what they had seen Jake do to the innocent dog. A businessman gave Marcus his card and said he was a lawyer who would be happy to help prosecute the case for free. A mother with young children said her kids were traumatized by watching the animal abuse and wanted to see justice done. When the police cars arrived at the park, Jake tried to run away, but his legs were still too weak from fear. He only made it about 10 steps before stumbling and falling face first into the dirt. The crowd laughed at him as 2 police officers helped him back to his feet and placed handcuffs on his wrists. Officer Rodriguez was the first policeman to speak with Marcus Thompson. The officer recognized the famous boxer immediately and asked for his autograph after taking his statement about the incident. Marcus was polite and professional as he described exactly what Jake had done to Buddy and provided the names of witnesses. The animal control officer examined Buddy carefully to document any injuries from Jake's attack. She found bruising on the dog's tail and noted that his eyes were irritated from the dirt that had been thrown at him. The officer took photographs of Buddy's injuries and explained that this evidence would be used in court against Jake. Jake was loaded into the back of a police car while dozens of people recorded his arrest on their phones. He could hear them talking about posting the videos online and sharing them with news stations. His dream of internet fame was coming true, but not at all in the way he had imagined. Tommy and Rico were found hiding behind a tree on the other side of the park. They were also arrested as accomplices since they had helped Jake plan and record the attack on Buddy. The three friends who had started the day thinking they were so cool and tough were now all in handcuffs facing serious criminal charges. Marcus Thompson gave a brief interview to a local news reporter who had arrived at the scene. The champion boxer said that people who abuse animals should face the full force of the law. He explained that Buddy was not just his pet but a member of his family, and that the attack on his dog was like an attack on him personally. The crowd slowly began to disperse as the police finished their investigation and arrested all three young men. Many people came up to Marcus to shake his hand and thank him for standing up for his dog. Some folks asked for selfies with the famous boxer, and he was gracious enough to pose with them. Jake sat in the back of the police car watching through the window as Marcus gently picked up Buddy and carried him toward the parking lot. The dog looked content and safe in his owner's arms. Jake realized that he had learned the hardest lesson of his life and that his troubles were just beginning. As the police car drove away from the park, Jake could see people still recording videos and taking pictures of the scene where he had committed his crime. He knew that by tomorrow morning the whole world would know about what he had done to an innocent dog and how he had been confronted by a heavyweight boxing champion. Jake spent that night in jail thinking about everything that had happened in the park. The cold concrete walls and metal bars gave him plenty of time to realize how badly he had messed up his life. He could not sleep because every time he closed his eyes he saw Buddy's frightened face and heard the dog's cries of pain. The next morning, Jake's parents came to bail him out of jail. His mother was crying, and his father looked angrier than Jake had ever seen him before. They had watched the videos of his arrest on the news and were completely ashamed of their son's behavior. The ride home was silent except for his mother's quiet sobs. Within 24 hours, the video of Jake's confrontation with Marcus Thompson had been viewed over 10 million times on social media. But Jake was not getting the kind of attention he had dreamed about. People were calling him a monster and an animal abuser. His real name and address had been shared online and strangers were sending him angry messages. Jake was charged with animal cruelty, which was a felony in his state. He also faced charges for disturbing the peace and creating a public nuisance. His court-appointed lawyer explained that he could go to prison for up to 2 years if he was convicted on all charges. The lawyer recommended that Jake plead guilty and hope for mercy from the judge. Tommy and Rico were also facing criminal charges, but they quickly agreed to testify against Jake in exchange for lighter sentences. The two friends who had laughed and cheered while Jake tortured Buddy now claimed they had tried to stop him. Jake realized that when people face serious consequences, they often turn on each other to save themselves. The local news stations ran the story every night for a week. They interviewed Marcus Thompson, who said he hoped Jake would get the maximum sentence allotted by law. The champion boxer also announced that he was starting a foundation to help abused animals and would donate $50,000 to local animal shelters in Buddy's name. Jake was banned from Riverside Park for life. He was also banned from several other public places in the city after business owners saw the videos of him abusing the dog. Some restaurants and stores put up his picture and refused to serve him. Jake discovered that becoming infamous was much worse than being unknown. The judge who handled Jake's case was known for being tough on animal cruelty cases. Judge Martinez had 2 rescue dogs of her own and took these crimes very seriously. She sentenced Jake to 18 months in prison, followed by 3 years of probation. She also ordered him to pay $10,000 in fines and perform 500 hours of community service at animal shelters. Prison was the hardest experience of Jake's life. He was no longer the tough guy who could intimidate people in the park. Instead, he was just another scared young man surrounded by criminals who were much more dangerous than he could ever be. Many of the other inmates had seen the video of his crime, and they did not like people who hurt innocent animals. Jake spent his time in prison reading books about animal behavior and psychology. He wanted to understand why he had thought it was acceptable to hurt a defenseless creature for entertainment. The prison library became his refuge from the daily stress and danger of life behind bars. When Jake was released from prison after serving his full sentence, he was a completely different person. The experience had humbled him and taught him about the consequences of his actions. He no longer cared about becoming famous on social media or impressing people with cruel pranks. Jake began working at the animal shelter where he was required to do his community service. At first, the other volunteers and staff members did not trust him because they knew about his past. But Jake worked hard every day to prove that he had changed. He cleaned kennels, fed animals, and helped with medical treatments. Over the months, Jake developed a special bond with the rescue dogs at the shelter. Many of them had been abused or neglected by their previous owners. Jake saw his own story reflected in their frightened eyes and damaged spirits. He became determined to help heal them the same way prison had helped heal him. Marcus Thompson heard about Jake's work at the animal shelter through mutual friends. The champion boxer was surprised to learn that the young man who had hurt his dog was now dedicating his life to helping other animals. After much consideration, Marcus decided to visit Jake at the shelter to see this transformation for himself. The meeting between Jake and Marcus was awkward at first. Jake apologized sincerely for what he had done to Buddy and explained how much he had changed since that terrible day in the park. Marcus listened carefully and could see that Jake's remorse was genuine. The boxer decided to give Jake a second chance. Marcus agreed to drop the remaining charges against Jake in exchange for Jake continuing his work with rescue animals. The champion also offered to help fund Jake's education if he wanted to become a veterinary technician. Jake accepted the offer gratefully and enrolled in community college to study animal care. 3 years later, Jake graduated from his program and was hired as a full-time employee at the animal shelter. He had helped rehabilitate over 200 rescue dogs and had become one of the most trusted staff members. Jake often spoke to school groups about the importance of treating animals with kindness and respect. Jake never forgot the lesson he learned that day in Riverside Park. He understood that true strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves, not from hurting them. The young man who had once sought fame through cruelty had found purpose through compassion and redemption through service to others.